Please welcome director James Foley. You've seen VR. Is it fair to say you're working on it with 50 Shades Darker?
Yeah, there's marketing material that's been done for like a kind of behind the scenes, where after we finished some principal scenes shooting for the day, the actors would stay over and the VR people would come in and kind of recreate a facsimile of the scene from a very different perspective, which was very eye-opening.
We kind of went through VR 1.0, which was the VR PR piece, which is the movies were made. They said, okay, we want a VR piece to release of that. We went back with the principal bit photography, tried to put together a piece. Do you see VR as something that you, as the director, want to have as a part of your conversation from the entire creative process?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my own personal instinct is that cinema is just going to move to VR because it's an expansion of the visual language. And for myself, watching the material that they generated in the behind-the-scenes recreation of scenes, it just kind of expanded my brain about when you're directing, you're there looking at the actors moving around in space and you see what seems real or natural, believable. And then it's a 360 opportunity for how are you going to shoot this in 2 dimensions. And if that gets expanded where you have much more information available in your toolbox, then everything changes. The basic tools of cinema which D.W. Griffith established in terms of close-ups and long shots and 2 shots and pans and reverses all needs to be reinvented, not just by a factor of 2, but by a factor of 360.
If you are given the task or you have an interest, and I know the studios listen to you very carefully on directing, do you say, I want to use the same crew that I'm using for my film, I will teach them VR? Do you want to bring in someone who's an expert in VR and teach them traditional filmmakers? How would you put together a team to create it?
That's a great question because it's going to be the next step. And I just worked with, an Oscar-winning great cinematographer who is relentlessly hungry for new technology, and I would love to see what his involvement in VR would result in. Just thinking of the movies we just shot, I think he would have the ability to transfer his 2-dimensional vision into something different. But in the transition, you would have to bring in VR people with some experience, somebody who knew what the hell we were doing, and could guide us in the technology. But I think, there'll be that transitional period, but I think it's inevitable. And the best and the brightest of filmmakers will graduate to it.
The quality of VR right now is a bit rudimentary, but you've got Ang Lee with Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk coming out in 3 weeks at 120 frames a second, 4K, 3D, and 360 sound. So you filmmakers are marching ahead technically to more immerse your subjects in the audience. You'll be doing that with 50 Shades Darker. Are you, in the VR that you've seen, how much work do you think lies ahead to get that to a quality that you want to have your name listed on it when it comes out?
I think there's a lot of work to do for the issue you brought up of integrating the film artist with VR technology. But just because I'm in the editing process now, and we're sitting there editing on an Avid and doing all sorts of things with sound and Atmos and stuff. And so the editor I'm working with edited endless numbers of movies going back 30 years, but when he was editing on film, and we were talking about it, that that transition had to happen from film to digital, and the transition from, I think, 2D traditional cinema to VR is a similar sort of technological leap into being even more expressive emotionally and psychologically than you can be with the old technology.
You're shooting 50 Shades, 2 movies back to back?
Yeah.
And you've done that with House of Cards is shot back to back.
Yeah, we would shoot 2 episodes at a time.
So you have been handed technological challenges. before. If you were assembling a crew to talk about this and say, okay, we're going to make VR, how would you talk to them so that they do not bring to their conversation a strict 2D, typical independent film mentality?
Yeah, I think it's, you know, very dependent on the person. I mean, whoever invented VR obviously had a vision that was beyond a flat image. And so my idea of, you know, collecting a crew has always been the same. You know, you meet people who just, you know that they have the technical expertise because that's been established, and then it's just what the hell is in their heart and soul and how they react to the story that you're about to tell. So I'd give more weight to people who had a, similar to myself, emotional reaction to something than whether or not they had the technical history, because I feel as if we could bring on people that would collaborate with them and the crossover would begin to happen.
So you want them to have the creative chops. We can acquire the VR.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
As a part of it. In seeing what you have seen and knowing what's happening, it seems that a lot of the VR are companion pieces to big movies like 50 Shades Darker or Star Wars or X-Men. Do you see VR becoming a narrative experience that is independent of a feature film? You have made so many wonderful independent films that weren't big blockbusters. Do you think this is a new platform for you to create with?
100%. I think it's the inevitable future, and I think that future is going to come sooner rather than later. And the only issues are going to be financial in the beginning. In terms of any new technology, it's going to be more expensive than the old technology. But that train is leaving the station, I think, and traveling really fast. And for myself, when I had this sort of epiphany, when I saw what these guys were shooting after I shot a scene, how they imagined it, it sort of made me feel as if my brain was a little bit small, you know, that I hadn't thought about all the permutations of where you could be, what your point of view was at what moment when the action was happening. So I just feel as if it's, you know, sort of maturing from checkers to chess. It's a different game.
You're at home in a theater as much as in a movie theater. Would you think, in terms of talking with your actors and others, how would you direct them, knowing that you are going to capture them in a whole new way?
Well, I think, I mean, the whining of actors sometimes is always when you're trying to fit them into a space to recreate it in 2 dimensions. It's flat and reality is not. And they're often pushed into a position where they're doing something that will read correctly on the camera, but in reality is awkward or not real. I mean, the best actors understand this is part of the challenge of the technology, but I think the technology of VR just liberates the actor and the director to all sorts of different possibilities that just weren't technically possible on 2 dimensions. So, you know, there's always the perfect place to shoot a scene from, theoretically. And it may not be a camera there in front of us, or a camera there, or a camera there, but it could be a camera up here, or it could be a camera down there. It's just trying to find the sweet spot of the emotion of the scene. And I think VR just opens up a world to better identify what that sweet spot is.
You've been able to attract the greatest actors of our generation. When you look back at your career and you look back at the people you've worked with, is there something all these actors have in common that you say, when someone asks you, you say, let me tell you something about a great actor. A great actor is what?
A great actor is in relentless pursuit of an emotional moment that is real, not pretending to be, not acting to be, but actually what happens in the moment when the actor is saying words or not, or looking or interacting with some other actor, that the emotion is real. It may come because every actor has a different technique about how they get there, but you know when it's real. So you might do 10 takes of a scene, and they might be all technically kind of good, but you get to take 10, and the actor sort of reaches a moment where he lets go of thinking about what the scene is or what the words are, and just is for a second, and it leaps off the screen. And Al Pacino was king of that, because he would do a lot of takes which were long and kind of all over the place, but then he would hit a sweet spot where you just felt, I would think for a second, he stopped saying the words, now he's just talking to me. But he wasn't. He was saying the words in the scene, but it became so real that I lost the facade of
Is there
cinema.
a moment when both you and Al Pacino know that you've got what you want?
Oh, God, yeah. And it's one of the sweetest moments when you say cut, because every actor, when you say cut, looks to the director for a reaction, whether they'll admit that or not. They always do. And Pacino was very open about it. He wanted to see what you thought about that, and when he hit it, he knew it. And when he didn't, he knew it. So there's no kidding around.
You have made blockbusters. You're about to make two of the biggest movies in the next couple of years. You have made wonderful small movies. It seems that you have moved purposefully to large budgets and small, and making great movies happen. Most of the people in this room are in that process, and we were just talking about this, where they're in the discussion with the studio about financing something or raising money to do it. And you've had a fair amount of experience in how you psych yourself up in the morning to go out and put your, I got to raise money for this, or I've got to create it. What's that process like for you?
For me, it's always been a matter of delineating those two jobs. One is to make the movie and be creative and as expressive as you can possibly be. The other is being a politician in a high finance world of big banks and big studios, and having to look at them as corporations, where instead of looking across at the studio, head of the studio is somebody who's your enemy in the pursuit of creativity, but somebody who's answering to a board of directors. So when the movie doesn't work, they say, why the hell did you hire Foley? I mean, it makes no sense. So they're taking a risk, and they have to answer to a board of directors. So it's a matter of speaking to them in that context of reassuring them your belief that it's going to be successful and it's going to work. And that sort of game is necessary to go forward, but it needs to be kept separate from when you're standing on the set and directing and making decisions. It's not with the holding in your mind what the studio is going to think or what anyone's going to think. It's just what you feel is the truth. But you have to have both those skills. And I remember going back to film school, there were some really terrifically creative people who just were perhaps more personality-wise withdrawn and not very verbal, and they didn't prosper because you have to go into a room and all you have are your words to create in someone's imagination what the film's ultimately going to be $50 million and a year later.
You're a role model to many people in this room. You're in pre-production, so I know we only have you for a few moments this afternoon. Godspeed, Jamie, and come back to us when we can have some more time with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.